Some stories don't begin with gunshots or sirens. Sometimes they start with the sound of a broken engine and a little girl with a toolbox. Julian Carter never planned to stop on that road. He was just passing through the outskirts of a forgotten Georgia town when his Harley-Davidson coughed one last puff of black smoke and gave out, like an overworked horse in a desert. He cursed under his breath, kicking the rear tire. The heat was relentless, the road deserted, and of course, his phone had no signal. For a man worth over $50 million, 0 cents, used to closing multi-million-dollar construction deals with a single phone call, this silence felt like a different kind of poverty. Then came a voice, soft but sure. "Is it broken?" Julian turned around and saw her, a skinny black girl, maybe 8 or 9, with a makeshift metal toolbox in her hand and the kind of eyes you only get from seeing too much too young. Her t-shirt was torn, her curls were wild, but her hands moved with purpose. "I can take a look if you want," she said, walking right up to the engine like she owned it. Julian's first instinct was to laugh. This was a $40,000 0-cent machine. What could a kid possibly know about carburetors and compression ratios? But something stopped him. Maybe it was the confidence in her voice. Maybe it was how she crouched next to the bike without asking permission, examining the engine like a surgeon preparing for a transplant. Or maybe it was fate. Because fate doesn't care about bank accounts or business cards. Fate loves a full circle. "What's your name?" he asked. Maya." She didn't look up as she said it. Her fingers were already finding the choke valve. "It's the carburetor. Gummed up from bad fuel. I've seen it before, my mom taught me." That line hit Julian harder than the engine stalling. He crouched beside her, watching this tiny girl pull the air filter and tinker with the precision no child should have. Then he noticed it. The bracelet. A delicate silver chain with 3 tiny engraved flowers. The same one he had given Carmen Williams 15 years ago. The same Carmen he had loved but left, pressured by his conservative family and racist board members who threatened to cut funding if he kept dating a black woman. The past slammed into him like a semi-truck. "Where did you get that bracelet?" he asked, voice dry. Maya shrugged. "My mom gave it to me. Said it was from a rich man who loved her once but didn't want a black girlfriend." Julian's world tilted. "What was your mom's name?" "Carmen. Carmen Williams. She died 2 years ago." He didn't hear the rest of her sentence. He didn't hear about how a man named Thomas Davidson took her in, promising shelter and instead delivering exploitation. Julian only saw Carmen crying in his apartment, begging him not to choose status over love. And now here was Maya, his daughter, there was no doubt in his mind, living in poverty, working for food, being used. "What kind of work do you do for Mr. Davidson?" he asked gently. Maya didn't hesitate. "Stuff kids shouldn't do. But if I don't, he says he'll send me away." Julian stood up, his heart racing with guilt and fury. Carmen had died alone, and this little girl, his little girl, was scrubbing motel bathrooms instead of reading bedtime stories. He watched her finish tightening the carburetor bolts and fire up the engine. It purred like a kitten. She smiled for the first time. Then a truck pulled up, and everything changed. "Where the hell have you been?" The voice was rough, southern. Mean Thomas Davidson stepped out, built like a linebacker gone soft. Greasy hat, yellowed shirt, eyes cold. He walked straight up and smacked Maya on the back of the head. "You weren't hired to help strangers, girl. You got beds to make." Julian felt his fists clench, but he stayed calm. "She helped me. I'd like to pay her." Davidson sneered. "Sure you would, big shot. $15'll cover it." Julian pulled out 100. "She's worth more than that." Davidson's eyes lit up, but he snatched the bill and gave none of it to Maya. Then he shoved her back toward the truck. Julian didn't stop him. Not yet. He watched. He followed. He waited. Because this wasn't about pride. It was about strategy. And predators don't even know they're being hunted until it's too late. Over the next few hours, Julian saw more than he could stomach. Maya wasn't just doing chores. She was doing everything. Carrying water, washing sheets, cleaning rooms rented by the hour. The inn wasn't a business, it was a trap. She's been doing that since she got here, said the nearby diner owner when Julian asked. Everyone knows, but no one touches Davison. Sheriff's on his payroll. By nightfall, Julian had already called a private investigator, and this time he didn't whisper. He said the words out loud. She's my daughter. It was the first time he admitted it, and the moment he said it, the mission became personal, not just revenge, not just guilt. This was about redemption. For Carmen, for Maya, for himself, and it had just begun. By sunrise the next morning, Julian Carter was already seated in the back booth of a 24-hour diner on the edge of town, steam curling from his untouched cup of black coffee. Across from him sat Marcus Green, a private investigator Julian had trusted for over a decade. Marcus was flipping through a thick manila folder, his face hardening more with every page. "Julian," he said quietly, "this guy Davidson, he's worse than you think." Julian didn't flinch. "Tell me everything." Over the next few minutes, Marcus laid out a disturbing portrait. Thomas Davidson had been investigated twice, once in Mississippi, once in Tennessee, for suspected child labor violations and unlawful guardianship of minors. In both cases, charges were dropped, not due to innocence, but due to insufficient evidence and suspiciously missing witnesses. Now in Georgia, Davidson operated under the radar, running what he called an inn, but was effectively a front for child exploitation. He'd adopted over a dozen vulnerable kids in the past 5 years. Orphans, runaways, kids from families too poor to fight back. Officially, they were housekeepers. Unofficially, they were unpaid labor. And sometimes worse. Worse. Julian's jaw tightened. "And the sheriff?" he asked. Marcus nodded grimly. "Sheriff Jake Morrison's been pocketing bribes for years. 10 grand a month to keep Davidson's name clean. There are pictures, cookouts, cash handoffs, even bank records from a dummy account." Julian looked through the folder. Photos of bruised kids, medical reports with suspicious injuries, screenshots of anonymous reports from neighbors describing screams at night. Each page made the weight in his chest grow heavier. "I want 3 things," Julian said. "First, a team of investigators watching that inn, 24/7. Get evidence. Video, audio, everything. Second, track down any of Davidson's regulars. I want names, faces, and connections. Third, get me in front of a federal prosecutor by tomorrow. Jessica Chen. Tell her I have proof of a multi-state child trafficking ring." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Jen's tough. She doesn't meet with civilians." "Then tell her Julian Carter is not just any civilian. I've got financial records, photos, investigators, and motivation. Make it happen." With that, Julian stepped outside and climbed onto his Harley. This time, he wasn't riding off in frustration. He had a purpose. He drove straight to the Davidson Inn, parked his bike right in front, and walked through the front door like a man ready to buy the place. Davidson looked up from behind the counter, half focused on a grimy magazine. "You again," he sneered. "The motorcycle playboy. You back for more help?" Julian smiled politely and slid a business card across the counter. "I'm back with a business offer." Davidson picked it up, his eyes widening when he read, "Julian Carter, CEO, Carter Development Group, estimated net worth $52 million, 0 cents. "Well now," Davidson chuckled, suddenly attentive. "Guess I misjudged you. I own several properties that need upkeep, small repairs, mechanical work, cleaning. Your girl Maya showed talent. I'd like to hire her. $500 a week." Davidson's mouth twitched. That was more than he made in a month. What exactly would she be doing? "Mostly mechanical work. Learning. We'll also make sure she gets tutoring and medical care. She'd have her own room, her own bed." Davidson laughed, but there was a flicker of unease behind his eyes. "She's just a kid. Don't need to spoil her with all that." Julian leaned in. "It's not spoiling, it's investing. This girl's got potential. She shouldn't be hauling dirty linens and breathing bleach all day." Davidson stared for a moment before shouting for Maya. She came out from behind a trailer, dragging a mop, eyes dull with exhaustion. When she saw Julian, something changed, a flicker of hope. "Hey there," Julian said, kneeling to meet her gaze. "I wanted to ask, you like fixing things, right? Want to learn more?" Maya's eyes widened, but she hesitated. "Would I still have to clean the rooms?" "No," Julian said firmly, "just mechanics. And school, and maybe your own bed." She looked at Davidson, unsure. Davidson barked, "She doesn't need school. She needs to work." Julian stood and turned to Davidson, his smile disappearing. "I'll see you Monday." Back in the parking lot, he called Marcus. "Change of plans. I don't trust Davidson to wait a week. I need that meeting with Chen today." Marcus didn't argue. "You're in luck. She's already looking into Davidson. Someone tipped her office 3 months ago. They didn't have enough to act until now." "Good," Julian said. "Also start pulling financials on Carter Development. I need to show I can provide a stable home. I'm taking Maya out of there permanently." That night, Julian sat in his study, surrounded by legal documents, adoption guidelines, and evidence files. In the center of his desk was a photograph, faded and torn, of Carmen, the woman he'd once loved but abandoned for status. He whispered, "I failed you, but I won't fail her." The next morning, Julian met with Jessica Chen in a secure federal office downtown. She wasn't what he expected. Early 40s, no nonsense, sharp eyes that miss nothing. "Mr. Carter," she said, scanning the documents. "I won't lie, this is damning. With your resources and testimony, we can launch a federal operation. Then let's do it." Chen looked at him. "This won't be pretty. Davidson has protection. People will come after you." Julian didn't blink. "Let them try. He's hurting my daughter." Chen sat back. "Your daughter?" Julian nodded. "Her name is Maya, and she has no idea the man who abandoned her mother is ready to bring down the entire state to protect her." Chen closed the folder. "Then, we'd better make sure you're ready." Monday morning broke with a crack of thunder and the unmistakable whirl of helicopter blades slicing through humid Georgia air. At exactly 6:47 a.m., the Davidson Inn, formerly just another nameless motel off a forgotten road, was surrounded by unmarked, black SUVs, flashing red lights, and a federal strike team armed with search warrants and bulletproof resolve. For Thomas Davidson, it might as well have been the gates of hell opening right in his front yard. Julian Carter stood in the center of it all, flanked by prosecutor Jessica Chen and a team of federal agents. Dressed in a dark tailored suit, his expression was unreadable, except for his eyes. His eyes burned with something deeper than anger. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about restoration. Agent Martinez stepped forward. "Thomas Davidson, you are under arrest for the trafficking and exploitation of minors, conspiracy to commit child endangerment, and obstruction of federal investigations." Davidson stumbled out of his trailer, still in his wrinkled pajamas, eyes wild, mouth slack. "You people are out of your minds. I take care of these kids. I feed them. I give them work. But his voice died when he saw Julian. "You," he muttered, the color draining from his face. "You set this up." Julian didn't say a word. He just handed a thick folder of evidence to Agent Martinez, while Marcus Green emerged from a nearby SUV carrying 3 more. Inside were bank records, photographs, medical reports, and surveillance footage gathered over the past 72 hours. Davidson hadn't just abused children, he had built a system for it. Sheriff Morrison, arriving with the intention of helping Davidson, barely got out of his car before 2 agents flanked him and snapped the cuffs on his wrists. "Jake Morrison, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, accepting bribes, and conspiracy to conceal crimes against minors," an agent said as they read him his rights. "This is a mistake," Morrison shouted. "You can't prove anything." "Oh, but we can," Chin replied coldly. "We have $120,000, 0 cents in bank transfers from Davidson, surveillance of you destroying reports, and witness testimony." Meanwhile, Julian walked quietly toward the back of the inn, toward the tiny window where he knew Maya slept. The inside of the room was barely more than a closet, a stained mattress on the floor, a broken lamp. And in the corner, Maya, clutching the same cleaning bucket she always carried, her eyes wide with terror. "Maya," Julian said gently. "Remember me? The man with the motorcycle?" She nodded slowly. "Are they going to take me away?" Julian knelt beside her. "No, sweetheart, they're taking him away. And you'll never have to clean another room, carry heavy buckets, or be afraid again." He pulled out the photo, the one of him and Carmen, young and hopeful. "Your mom, she and I loved each other, But I made a mistake, Maya. I let people convince me that loving her was wrong. I never knew about you, but now I do, and I promise I will never leave you again." Tears streamed silently down her cheeks. "You're my dad?" "I am," he said, voice cracking. "And I'm here now." Outside, Davidson was still protesting as the agents hauled him toward the back of a cruiser. "This is persecution!" "I didn't know who she was." Julian approached him slowly. "That's your problem. You treat all these kids like they don't matter, like they don't have families or fathers or anyone who'd come for them. But you picked the wrong child this time." Davidson started to shake. "If I had known," Julian cut him off. "You shouldn't do that to any child. But because you did it to mine, your punishment will be absolute." Chen approached with a tablet in hand. "Mr. Davidson, can you explain these text messages?" "New merchandise arriving Thursday. Extra charge for underage." Davidson's mouth opened, then closed. "It's not what it looks like." "And this?" Chen continued, tapping the screen. $50,000, 0 cents transferred to your account from a man with 3 prior child pornography charges? The evidence was a sledgehammer, crushing every lie before it could form. Media crews, tipped off anonymously, had already begun broadcasting. The story was live on every major local outlet. Davidson's empire was falling apart in real time. Julian carried Maya out in his arms, her face buried in his chest. For the first time, she looked peaceful. Safe back at the federal headquarters, Chen updated Julian. "Your testimony and evidence gave us exactly what we needed. Davidson is facing 23 federal charges. We've frozen his accounts and assets. He's looking at 40 years, minimum. No parole." "And the children?" Julian asked. "They'll be placed with vetted families. And the inn, well, it's yours now. At the auction, no one outbid your offer." Julian smiled softly. "I don't want it for business. I'm turning it into a shelter, a vocational center. We'll call it the Carmen Williams Center." A year later, that center stood as a beacon of transformation. What had once been a place of exploitation was now filled with laughter, tools, books, and hope. Maya, now 10, walked the halls in a blue jumpsuit with her name stitched across the chest. She was the youngest instructor assistant in the program, teaching other orphan kids how to fix engines and rebuild their lives. "An engine's like a person," she'd say, guiding their hands with gentle confidence. "It needs respect. Every part has a job." Julian would often watch from his office window, eyes filled with pride, once a year, when he walked in, holding a framed photo of her mother. "Dad," she said, "do you think Mom would be proud?" Julian swallowed hard. "I think she'd be amazed." At that year's graduation for the center's first class of mechanics, Julian took the stage. 2 years ago, he said, voice steady, a man learned that his greatest treasure had been hidden inside his biggest regret. And instead of destroying the man who caused the pain, he built something so powerful it turned that pain into purpose. The crowd erupted into applause. Maya, front row, clapped with tears in her eyes. Davidson had tried to crush a spirit, but instead he had created the very storm that would ruin him. And in his place stood a girl who believed again, not just in people, but in her own worth. Julian had started with guilt, but what he gave his daughter. And every child like her was something no amount of money could buy, a future rewritten by love, restored by justice, and powered by a father's promise never to fail again.